two things I've always felt about Baker Mayfield, and I still feel them this morning. I wouldn't build my franchise around him long-term deal. A little too much cowboy for me, a little bit too much ego, lack of discipline. But I've also said from the beginning, he is one of the 32 best people on the planet. If you give him decent protection, put him in the pocket, and throw a football. Absolutely one of the best people on the planet to do that. In a strange way, last night was perfect for Baker Mayfield. It felt ad-libbed, plays in the dirt. Baker has struggled with structure and rules and hierarchy and being told what he has to do. That wasn't last night. There was a little chaos. You needed an edge. You needed adrenaline, big emotion. Hell with those rules. I kind of want to do it my way with a limited number of plays. That is Baker Mayfield. Manning, Brady, and most, not all great quarterbacks, Manning and Brady are intense, and they're specific, and it's prep, and it's film day and night. Baker is Favre light. He's a gunslinger. Hell with those rules. Last night would have crushed Kirk Cousins, who's a man of structure. Kirk Cousins would have been absolutely awful last night. But I'd build my franchise more around Kirk Cousins. Last night was built for Baker Mayfield. I needed confidence, little ego, little cowboy, little edge, little adrenaline. That's always been Baker at his best. He even struggled with the structure of the weekly podium chat with the media. Too many rules. I want to say what I want to say. Sometimes you have to fall on the sword. Eli Manning, Russell Wilson, say what people want to hear. Two things from last night. I felt it was Baker Mayfield's greatest moment as a pro. I know he won a playoff game with Cleveland. That team was loaded. That offensive line was unbelievable. Tight ends, Nick Chubb, wide receivers. Just don't crash the Mercedes. Last night, the Rams are a mess. Folks, they're a mess. I'm not blaming anybody, but Ben Skoranek was his go-to guy. On the other side of the field, it was Devontae Adams. Derek Carr, team on a winning streak. This team was a mess. I thought that was Baker Mayfield's greatest moment as a pro. And the second thing I feel, and this is pretty cool, I thought last night got him one more shot to be a starting quarterback in this league. Absolutely. This league replaces a quarter of its coaches every year and a quarter of its quarterbacks. They're looking for teams. Teams are looking for players. Baker Mayfield has often been his own worst enemy. Nobody can deny that, even Baker's fans. And let's not go crazy here. Backups, and that's what he is now in the league. He went on waivers, and nobody claimed him but the Rams. He's viewed as a backup. Backups win all the time. Cooper Rush won 4 straight games. Taylor Heineke's won 5 or 6. But last night was wonderful drama. If you didn't root for Baker Mayfield last night, you don't have a soul. Come on. Baker has always been more of a craps player than a professor counting cards. And last night felt like Vegas. Way to go, Baker. Okay, let's talk. I'm going to get back to Baker several times. I do want to talk about the Raiders. So I have been very pro-Raiders this season. I see a team playing with heart and passion. But last night, Baker Mayfield, who'd been in town 48 hours behind a bad O-line with no number 1 or 2 or 3 receiver, threw the ball 35 times. Sean McVay had the confidence in Baker Mayfield to throw the ball 35 times. Josh McDaniels only allowed Derek Carr to throw the ball 20 times. It was a bizarrely conservative game plan. I mean, last night proved how great Sean McVay is. God, Matt Rule had Baker Mayfield for 14 weeks, didn't do squat. Sean McVay had him for 48 hours, and that's as good as Baker can play. But Josh, I understand a formula. So Josh McDaniels comes from New England, and New England had this sort of formula. That's why, like Alabama at their peak with Saban was the most boring dynasty ever. Get a lead, eat the clock, run the ball, don't turn it over, 23-17, bye-bye, off to the next W. It's boring. But the Raiders can't use that formula because outside of Max Crosby, they don't really have elite defensive players, nor do they have Bill Belichick on staff. So when you take a 13-3 lead, even with Baker Mayfield just flying into town a couple of days earlier, you got to adjust. And the formula for the Raiders during this winning streak, 3-game winning streak, has been pretty clear. I looked it up this morning. Josh Jacobs, 24 carries, win. Josh Jacobs, 33 carries, win. Josh Jacobs, 26 carries, all wins. But last night, he started struggling, getting only 3.5 yards. And Davante Adams was on fire early, yet didn't have a catch in the second half. Look at the series last night in the second half of the Raiders. It was the classic, you've got to adjust. Punt, punt, field goal, punt, interception. What are we doing here? You had to veer off your formula. You know, my wife, her family was in the culinary business. Bakers follow directions. If you're making cookies and don't put in enough butter, it ruins the cookies. Chefs are different. Chefs are a little salt, little butter, little bacon grease, little tweak. Taste the soup as you go. I mean, there's a recipe to make the soup, but you're constantly tweaking. That's really what an NFL head coach is. You want a recipe, but you are watching the game. You're watching it live. Sometimes you get conservative. Sometimes the run game is working. You don't need to pass. Last night was a classic. Josh McDaniels was a baker, and they needed a chef. Dude, get the ball to Davante Adams. The Raiders are 5-0 when Davante Adams has a big night. It's not complicated. We went and looked it up this morning. It's real clear. When Davante Adams has 5 or more catches, the Raiders win. And when he doesn't, they don't. So you should get him the ball in the second half. Get him the ball and get him a ball a lot. And by the way, he burned Jalen Ramsey on the first big pass of the game. Jalen Ramsey's good. Davante Adams, in my opinion, probably the best wide receiver in football. Has his college quarterback. That was a classic example of the Raiders needed a chef as a coach, and Josh McDaniel followed the formula, a baker, and they lost. To Baker. Just made that up in the fly right there. The Raiders averaged 7 yards a pass play. Rams only averaged about 5. And yet the Raiders only had 6 passing first downs, half of what Baker Mayfield had. The Rams played with energy, took risks, took swings, played to win. The Raiders played not to lose, and that's what happens in 2022. You can't use that formula. Belichick's trying to use that formula. It's a different game. It's a different league. That one's on the coach. Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.